Hello, this is Brooks Whittington with halfwheel.com. Today we're taking a look at the Credo 80 ring gauge double blade cutter. Now this was introduced by Credo in February of this year at a price point of $8.95 each. And it is one of the only cutters on the market at the moment that can actually cut a 80 ring gauge cigar right in half. You can see that this 80 ring gauge will fit right in the middle of that, and you could easily cut that in half if you felt like it. This is not the only version of this cutter that Credo makes. They make quite a few of them, in fact. One of them is the 70 ring gauge, as you see here. The 60 ring gauge follows, as you see here. And there's even a version with a 60 ring gauge here and a 38 ring gauge also included in the same cutter. Now, Credo also makes a upgraded version of this style called the Syncro that not only includes stainless steel blades but also a leather storage pouch. It comes in at a price point of about $70 or so. So as I mentioned before, the Credo 80 ring gauge double blade cutter is one of the small number of cutters that can easily cut an 80 ring gauge completely in half. So you can see here it fits all the way through and even has a little bit of room to spare. It actually is a design that combines the traditional double guillotine cutter and cigar scissors, which is how it opens. The exterior is made of ABS plastic, and the two blades are made of stainless steel. Cutter weighs in at 33 grams and measures 3.75 inches when it's closed, with a width of 2.25 inches that increases to 5 inches when it's open, like so. Now, you can cut an 80 ring gauge cigar completely in half, as I have shown. However, it's not necessary, obviously, to cut that 80 ring gauge completely in half. In order to smoke it, you can easily just cut the cap off of that cigar without having to push it all the way through. All right, now that that's out of the way, I thought I'd show how to actually use the Credo 80 ring gauge double blade cutter. Now, as I mentioned before, this is essentially a combination of cigar scissors and a dual guillotine cutter. And so you open it just like you would cigar scissors, or any scissors really, where you basically put your fingers in the openings and pull open on the blades, which opens each of the blades very, very easily. That's very, very easy thing to do. There's very little resistance there. The blades, interestingly, the blades actually move independently of each other. So if you ever came across the point where you wanted to move them independently of each other, you certainly have that option. In order to cut the cigar, you take the cap of the cigar here. This is an 80 ring gauge, and you put it into the opening, and you actually just push together the two blades, which pushes through the cap and will give you a cut cigar. Now, the problem that we have is that after about 20 cuts on this cutter, I started noticing that the blades were actually becoming noticeably duller, which means that you just basically cannot get a clean cut very, very often at all. And so you can see here as I cut this cigar, you can see that while the cut is not horrible, there's no damage to the wrapper, major damage, or to the cap. But it's also, this just really not very sharp at all. There's still tobacco left over and things of that nature. This happens no matter what you do and no matter what the size of the cigar is. This is a 70. And so you just put the cap on there and make sure you can actually see it. And do that, and you can see there actually a little bit of damage there, some issues. Again, smokable for sure, but it's just not clean, not even close to clean really. And this is just going to get worse as time goes on. As it continues to dull, those blades continue to dull, this is going to become worse and worse to the point where you're going to have some significant wrapper damage as well. This is a 60 ring gauge, and so you take it in there, put it on there, take it and cut, and you can see here you're starting to have some damage here. Still not clean at all. Very, very unclean, if you will. And that's the major problem with the cutter, is the fact that yes, it worked great for about 20 cuts, and then it just started getting worse and worse and worse, and will just continue to progressively get worse as it continues to be used. So now I thought I'd go through some of the good and bad things that I found out about the Credo 80 ring gauge double blade cutter as I was using it to cut about 60 cigars over a period of about a month, give or take. Good things. It's very obvious that it's a relatively inexpensive cutter at $8.95. You can buy enough of them to leave around or lose, or whatever it is you want to do with it, or not do with it for that case. It's very light. It's very easy to carry around in terms of being able to throw it in a bag or throw it in your pocket and not have to actually worry about that. It does cut 80 ring gauge cigars all the way through. In other words, you can just put that 80 ring gauge cigar in there and just push through and cut that thing all the way through. And that's something that you are looking for. There's not many cutters on the market that can do that. And so that's definitely an advantage. However, there's also some fairly significant bad things about it as well that I found. And the first is that the blades are really, really, really quick to start dulling. I found out after about 20 cuts that there were some major issues with how clean the cuts were getting, and there's no doubt in my mind that you'd have significantly, worse problems if you continue to use it to cut cigars, progressively worse. There's also the fact that the blades come open very easily on their own with just normal, walking around or whatever in your pocket. There were multiple times when I put my finger through this opening here when I was reaching for it in a bag, then that could cause some issues. I never had any problems cutting myself, but I would also learn very, very quickly to be very careful when I was doing that, because it does have a tendency to just come open at a, without provocation. And finally, there is a problem with balance when you're actually cutting cigars with this cutter. All of the weight is on the front end here, and because that's where the blades are. And so when you're actually cutting a cigar, you have to push down a little bit more than you would probably like to in order to push those blades through that cap. It's not a significant problem, but it's definitely something I noticed when I was using it, and something that I had to compensate for more than once. So in the end, can I recommend the Credo 80 ring gauge double blade cutter? The answer, unfortunately, is no. And it comes down to a couple of fairly significant reasons. The first is the fact that the blades are getting more dull as I continue to use this cutter. After 60 cuts or so, it's very obvious that the blades are not as sharp as they were, and it will continue to get worse until you're going to start having some significant wrapper damage. If you use it over 200 cuts or whatever, it's going to definitely get worse. Second thing is that it's not really necessary to have an 80 ring gauge cutter that can cut a cigar that size all the way through to cut an 80 ring gauge cigar. You can easily cut the cap off of an 80 ring gauge cigar with a smaller cutter. And if you need to be able to cut that cigar all the way through, then there's very few cutters on the market that can do that, and this should be one of them you look at. But you just don't need it, and therefore it's not necessary. And this is a product that will only get worse with time, and therefore, no matter what the price is, I can't recommend it. So for halfwheel.com, this is Brooks Whittington. For all of your cigar news and review related needs, go to halfwheel.com.